We were talking with somebody about their production versus their collections. Their production was around 200,000, but their collections was around 110. And we actually started talking about, well, how do you actually fix that? If your production is really high or your collections are low, these are the 5 steps that you need to take. Welcome back to another episode of My Dental Playbook. I'm your co-host, Gary Bird. Along with my friend, Dr. Blake Hamblin, we're going to dive deep into his practice and how he's gone from 200,000 to 500,000 in monthly collections in just 12 short months. Specifically today, we're going to be diving into collections versus production. Why do dentists produce so much dentistry and only collect so little? We're going to give you a 5-step process that you can use in your practice to make sure that your production and your collections are lining up. There's a free resource right down below. Also, we have a mastermind. It's $299 a month. If you are tired of listening to the show and not getting results, it's because you're not being held accountable. If you need a little bit of help, join our mastermind. We will open it up to you and answer all of your questions to make sure that you start growing the way that you want. Links are right down below. Also, we have a free course on going out of network. You can go to our website and you'll see that there, or the link will be down below for that. And lastly, and most importantly, our sponsor, Cherry. They help us keep this podcast on the air, and we love them. A ton of my clients use them, including Dr. Blake, and it revolutionizes your patient acceptance. If you want to learn how to make sure that you get a ton of value out of every single patient and you're collecting the max amount of money for their treatment and getting it done as fast as possible, Cherry is the answer. You'll see a 30% increase by using them in your treatment acceptance. Check out the link below. You get special pricing. Now, on to the show. All right, we are live for another episode, and Dr. Blake's running around crazy. He's going to have a record number of new patients in his office this week. Almost 50 new patients in your office this week. Insane. Biggest month ever, like biggest week ever, which is absolutely wild. So I appreciate you taking the time and still doing this podcast with me. And we're going to talk about what we talked in the mastermind. We just had a mastermind and we were talking with somebody about their production versus their collections. Their production was around 200,000, but their collections was around 110. And we actually started talking about, well, how do you actually fix that? And you have 5 steps that we need to go through to fix that. And so if anybody out there, if your production is really high or your collections are low, these are the 5 steps that you need to take. And I think the first one was, and this one's interesting to me, is understanding the difference between production and adjusted production.
So it's pretty straightforward, and I would say a lot of people understand it, but maybe don't. So you've got production, and that's the physical dollar amount. So if you charge $1,500 for a crown, that amount of production goes on your report. But however, what happens is you've got patients that decide they don't want to pay for their crown, or you've got insurances that decide, no, well, your crown is worth less than what you actually say it's worth. And so there are naturally some adjustments that occur throughout the billing cycle of a patient that have to be allocated to that. And that's really what you're collecting off of. You're not collecting off of that production number. You're collecting off of that adjusted production number. And so one thing we talked about was we're talking a lot about production. And then there were a lot of great questions around, well, what's your adjusted production? Because that's really what matters. And so his collections percentage was actually better than we originally thought based off of his adjusted production.
Well, and anytime I talk to you about production, you always go, I don't know, I don't track that. I just tracked adjusted production, which is basically collections.
And in my office, we have 100% collections or more. So I can assume that. But really, collections is the metric to follow because that's what your business operates off of. It doesn't really matter what your adjusted production is, because if you don't collect it, then it's like it never happened.
That's step number 1. You have to have these clearly defined. Your team needs to understand them. And really, production doesn't mean anything, right? It's adjusted production that we need to be operating off of. And then from there, collecting a fee before treatment, which at your office is $100. But you said a lot of some offices do 30%, some do 20, some do 50. Why do you do $100?
Yeah, so I think getting patients on the schedule is something we all want, right? And so but what we want more are patients that actually show up for their treatment. And so what we found is have pre-collecting specifically for doctor. The doctor schedule is very helpful in getting some buy-in for the patient. So they understand that they've got a little bit of skin in the game so that they're more privy to show up for that appointment. we've landed on $100. Some people decide they're going to require half of the treatment up front and collect the other half later. We've just found that like anything over $100, people generally just day of can't come up with. They can't say, yeah, I can't put down $800 today to reserve that appointment. So you may see a higher, your treatment acceptance rate may take a hit if you do that.
I want to explain this in a way that doctors hear this a lot of times. So you're creating more obstacles for them to say no. They may want to do the treatment. They may even have the money to do the treatment, but just not readily available. They don't have the credit. The credit card they have to use is at home or whatever it may be. And $100, typically, I can't use I have to ask my spouse card on that one. You know what I mean? Like you spend $100 at McDonald's now. You know what I mean? It's like it's a not a big amount of money. So you're getting more yeses instantly, and it's also easier for your team because it's way easier to sell. Hey, let's just put $100 down, and then we're going to book this treatment. Then let's put $4,000 down on this $8,000 treatment.
And on that financial menu that we use, it's already on there, so it's actually deducted from their total amount. So it makes it really easy. So if you're using that financial menu, just know that that's already factored in to the total.
Awesome. If you guys don't have that menu, it's on the last couple episodes ago. You can go check that out. Actually, our first episode, if you go back and look at that, I know for sure the financial menu is there, the exact one that Dr. Blake uses, so you can download that. Also, in this episode, we have this all outlined in a pretty document that you can hand to your team and train them. So if you want that, that's linked down below. But let's talk about the third thing. This one was really enlightening for me and also the other people who are in our mastermind. So you said we need to underestimate what insurance will pay. Could you walk me through that?
Sure, yeah. And I'll preface with I love insurance. Insurance works really well in our office, and we love Delta Dental, and we love all the other insurance companies out there. And so we all know that insurance says that they'll pay 50% of something, and then we get the money back, and we're like, well, where's the rest of it, right? And so what we've found is that our AR can be in much better order if we actually tell the patient, hey, they're going to cover 40% of this procedure, which is X amount of dollars. And so what that turns into is sometimes we end up having to write refund checks, which I'm totally okay with. The reason is because it's incredibly time consuming. And if you haven't asked your front desk team members about this, you should, and just ask them how much time they're spending having to follow up on AR and accounts that are overdue. And it's a lot of time. And so I would much rather have a stack of checks that I have to write refunds for and have to have my team spend that time to go chase people down, collect the money, take 4, 5, 6 phone calls sometimes just to get a hold of them. And so underestimating that insurance balance, you'll actually find that it's probably even more accurate than what you're getting from the insurance company.
Got it. Yeah. And and it's going to be different with every insurance company. So you kind of have to learn.
Yeah. And so if you're in network, you don't really have this problem because you already know what the fees are. But where it becomes a problem is when you're out of network and they say they're going to cover 50% of something and you're like 50% of what? Right. And so if you just downgrade the coverage to what you tell the patient, put you in a better success to where you may have less to collect or even nothing to collect, or you're going to refund.
Yeah. If you're giving a patient a refund, they love that.
Yeah. And that's the other thing too, is like psychologically, you now become the good guy. So now it's like my dentist sends me checks on the weekends versus my dentist calls me and asks me for more money for the procedure that I had.
You don't ever want to be the dentist that calls and asks for more money. That is, no matter what, once they set the number, whatever the number is, it doesn't even matter what it is. And then you call and you ask for, we need another $400, $500. It's just bad. Like it's not good. So anything you can do to avoid that. And this is true in the marketing world too. Something I learned early on with dentists working with them, they hate being nickeled and dimed. Like hate it. So we used to have a lot of marketing companies outside of dental, they have like menus. So it's like, oh, you want to do that? Then here's it's this much more. Oh, you want to do that? And then it's this much. Oh, you want to do that? Then it's this much. And in most marketing industries, like it's totally fine to do that. Dentists despise that because they get it. I think it's because of insurances, because they get nickeled and dimed to death. So we learned a long time ago, it's just like, nope, it's just like, here's a bunch of flat fees and this is it and kind of all in. And dentists just like that more, and patients just hate it when you do that. So that is such good advice. Are you okay to move on to the next one? Financing. So how does This one, I think really venture to say probably about 90% of dentists do not understand this, but having patient financing and leading with that rather than presenting it at the end actually helps you with insurance and helps you with your AR.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, the benefit is you're paying Cherry or whatever financing company that you use, you're paying them a fee for service. And so part of that fee is that they're actually going to pay you in advance of sometimes even in the procedure occurring, right? And so, like we talked about earlier, it reduces the floor at the front office. So your front office is having to call less people to collect money. And again, you're collecting that money right up front. So there's no confusion. It's like, this is how much, this is it.
There's no like insurance or doing this much or this. And it's really a non-issue because it's just like, oh, it's going to cost me $200 a month.
And to the patient, it's one fee. Like what we just talked about. It's not this and that and this and that. It's like, this is how much it is. And then you are now the insurance company. So that you are now removing yourself from that financial conversation, because now if they have issues, they talk with Cherry or they talk with that third party financing.
Yeah, exactly. And they're agreeing to something that's very digestible, right? Even if you have a lot of money, if I go to somebody and I'm like $9,000, it's like, ugh. I had a fridge break recently, and then when my daughter threw a toy in the living room, broke the TV, and it's just like, I want to like pay for all this. And you have kids, right? And it's just like, dude, I don't want to. Can I afford a fridge and a TV? Yes. Do I want to pay for a fridge and a TV? No, I don't. And it's like, so even when people have the money, like that $9,000 is a big number, but $200 or $300 a month is like, oh, I can afford that. And I can work that in with my bills, no problem. It doesn't really change my lifestyle. All right. So the next one, staying on top of AR. You had a funny story on this one.
Yeah. So I think our AR has always been in control, but I think the reason it's been in control is because we've outproduced it. And so that's a good and a bad problem because it only just grows your AR. But what we've been focusing on is I've now got one of my most tenured team members. She's really focused on this, and that's kind of going to be her main role. But we've got a new process and all that stuff. And so we're going through an account actually this morning, and it was from 2023. And that was like, oh gosh. And so I'm not 100% sure if we've been trying to follow up with her or not. But anyways, so the question came up was like, you want to send this to collections? And I was like, not 2 years later, I know. You know what I mean? Like that to what we talked about earlier. It's like, that's just a bad taste. And one of my, like, I'm billing you for something 2 years. That just, yeah. So it's like, I was just like, write it off. But like, ideally in the system that what we're trying to do is, at that 90-day mark, we have a decision of what we're going to do. So, and really even at that 60-day mark, we're going into that last 30 days saying, if we don't have payment by this date, then this is going to be our game plan moving forward, kind of internally. And so, in addition to that, most associates, if you're a multi-doc practice, you're paying either on collections, but most likely adjusted production. And so what I found as we've been growing doctors within the practice is if you never adjust the account, well, now you're back to the first point. You're paying on production. You're not paying on adjusted production if you never make adjustments, right? And so you have to be on top of that as the owner, and you got to have somebody else going through that with you to help guide, nurture that. So now our game plan is honestly, we've even got an internal way of managing this to where we're actually, if there's an account that we're sending to collection, we make an adjustment and we call it a collections adjustment. And we can run a report on our practice management software that shows those accounts. So we're not losing them. They're removed off of our AR report, but it makes the adjustment to the appropriate provider's production. So now as the owner or the business is not carrying that debt, it's now going to the provider. And when it comes in, it'll also go back to the provider if it ever comes up. But we've done our part for 90 days to try to collect that.
Got it. Okay. So those are really good 5 things. Now we got a bonus thing, and I'm throwing this at you. So if this curveball's too hard, you can tell me. But one of the things that I remember that you talked about was twofold. It was the patient journey handoff, that if you want your adjusted production to be where it's supposed to be, then you have to have a really smooth handoff. And then the patient should be signing for their treatment. Could you walk through what we talked about on that?
Yeah. So I think and it really goes into the financial menu, but it's just understanding the patient understanding what everything is. And so when we do anything, we want to make sure that we have both written and verbal consents and whatnot. And that also goes for financing. So when we present treatment, we have them sign. And even if they don't sign up for treatment, we have them still sign the financial review stating that they understand what we run through and they understand that the crown costs X amount of dollars. That doesn't mean that they're saying yes to treatment. They'll sign the consent form when they show up for the appointment saying they understand the risks and the alternatives, but they're signing the financial menu saying, I understand financially what's going on. So where that comes into play is we've all had these situations where Jenny comes in and she said, well, I didn't know that the crown was going to cost $1,500. And you're like, it's really weird. Like Casper must have snuck in and signed this form for it. And so it's really easy to like combat some of that stuff when you've got a digital record of that. And you can just say, hey, I totally understand. Would it be helpful if I sent over the forms that you sign that states that you understand the stuff?
It backs them off. So there's a rule, dental doesn't use it, but it's in all other sales industry. There's a rule in sales that buyers are liars. And I think that sometimes people lie, yes, but really what it means at its root is most people forget what they agreed to and they build out their own narrative and they have their own memory of it. So one of the things that we do at our company that's similar to that, and it's different because we're B2B, but we record every conversation. And knowingly, everybody knows we're recording this, this call may be recorded type thing. And so every single month, there's a doctor, very smart, they're smart people, they make good money, that tell us, no, that's not what you told us. You told us this every month. In the sales process, you promised us X, Y, and Z. And we go back to sales and we say, hey guys, they're saying that you never said this, that you said this, which is totally against our process. You guys know we're not supposed to say that. Can you pull up the call? And we pull up the call and we show them and we send it to them and we say, hey, this is where it was told. I just did this last week where a dentist said, you promised me I would get 50 new patients. And we're like, we don't promise new patients. We can't. Like, it's impossible. We promise the phones to ring and then you get new patients from that if you do A, B, and C, but that's not what they heard, right? And so we've gotten to the place where it's just like, we just record everything and it helps the doctor go, oh, okay, I misunderstood, which then you can work on that, but you can't work from you promised this and didn't deliver when you really didn't ever promise that.
Yeah, you've got such a backstop. Like it's almost gotten to the point in our organization to where like if we do that, we just end up having to take the word of the patient because it's not worth a bad review for $500 or whatever. And so it's just like, hey, learning lesson here. Like next time, make sure you've got the financial menu signed so that when this comes up, it makes the conversation so easy. Like it's so easy. Otherwise, you're just running in circles.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I love it. Well, great job today. This is very helpful. A lot of value. Again, if you want this all written out in like SOP format that you can share with your team, get them all on board with it. It's down below. Dr. Blake, you stay busy this week and make sure you get some rest.
Appreciate you. Have a good one.